Welcome to Life, Leases Law. Welcome. Tonight we're going to be doing something a little bit different. So I hope I get some people that want to participate. And because we're going to be talking about why is California rent so damn high? Why is it? Why is California rent so high? We are the expensive city, right? The expensive state. Why is California rent so high? So welcome to Life, Leases, and Law. Tonight I just wanted to have a real talk, real law, real solutions. So tonight we're going to switch it up a little bit. Usually a lot of information I give becomes important when something happens. You don't get a rent increase every day. You don't get 3-day notices all the time. But I've been talking about that. I've been talking about the California laws that's come into effect that's going to hurt landlords and tenants. And tonight I want to just talk about something that affects a lot of people. Is renting, right? And buying a home and having a home. So tonight, I want to talk about something that affects everybody who rents in California. And I'm mostly still dealing with Northern California. Why is rent so darn high? We got to talk about who's responsible for that. Is it the landlords? Is it the government? Is it developers? Is it rent control? Is it Silicon Valley? Or is it simply just supply and demand? Why do you think rent is so high? Put a comment down there. And if you are renting, why don't you let us know how much your rent is and what city you stay in? And if you're not in California, what state are you in? I have my iPad up just in case I get questions in that I can't read on the screen. So tonight we're going to talk about it all. So before I tell you what I think rent is so high, why I think California rent is so high, I want to hear from you on why you think California rent is so high. So let me know what is high rent doing to people's lives. So this is kind of our life part. What is it? First, let's talk about life in the life leases and law, right? Because rent isn't just a number. When somebody rent is $2,500 or $3,000 a month, that affects everybody. Everything else that you do, right? You gotta maybe budget differently. Maybe not travel as much. Maybe have to, go shop at different stores and get groceries. And I don't think that the high rents affect everyone. And we're going to kind of talk about that. When we had that Silicon Valley boom, they were making some great money and still making great money when they came in. But I want to just talk about, whether you could buy a home. Some people, they're renting now, but they would like to get a home. But can you save for a home when rent is kind of high? Whether you could take a vacation, how much you have to spend on groceries, whether you need a roommate or a couple of roommates. We're going to talk about how pad split and co-living is becoming a big thing now, where everyone kind of shares a house and you have your own room, but then you're sharing common areas like the living room, the kitchen, sometimes a bathroom, but that's the co-living part, to save some money. Whether your adult children is moving out, they might be staying in longer because it's expensive out there. Can you retire? You might have to work longer because the rent is high. And sometimes it just determines whether they could stay in California at all. Because a lot of people, they're moving out of California. So let me ask you, have housing costs ever made you think about leaving California? And if you did leave California, where did you go? And if you're thinking about leaving California because of these rents, where are you thinking about going? Yeah. Did the California rents ever think about making you leave California? Okay. I thought my iPad was connected, but it doesn't look like it is. So we're going to just move that to the side, and we'll just look on here if I get any questions. Okay. Have housing costs ever made you think about leaving California? So put the answer in the comments. And if your rent was $500 cheaper every month, what would you do with that extra $6,000 a year? So 2 questions. Have housing costs ever made you leave California? And if you're watching the replay, still put your answers in the comments, because I will be going back to look at them and talking about it next time. And if your rent was $500 cheaper every month, what would you do with the extra $6,000 a year? So if you're just coming in, we had a question on why is rent so damn high in California. And we're going to be talking about that. I haven't shared why I think it's high, but I just want to know why you think it's high. And how much rent are you paying if you stay in California, what city you in? And if you're out of state or even out the country, how much is your rent? And tell us where you from, what state you in, or what country you in. All right. So I want to talk about the leases for a minute on who decides what an apartment is worth. Who decides what an apartment is worth? Now let's talk about leases. So I hear people say that the apartment isn't worth $3,000. And you know what? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But here's the question. The owner could ask $3,000. That doesn't mean that somebody is going to pay $3,000, right? So if an apartment is listed for $3,000 and nobody applies, nobody inquires about that, and eventually the market is going to tell the owner something. It's not where it's too high. I could tell within, it used to be 2 weeks, I could tell within 7 to 10 days if I priced a rental too high, if me and the owner, whether that's how much the owner felt they needed, if I did my market analysis and I came with that's how much rent should be, I could know within 7 to 10 days if that rental is high. And my goal when I'm helping a housing provider, a landlord, owner, is to get their unit rented out as soon as possible, because every day it sits on the market, that's money that they're not getting back, right? So I try to get their unit rented as soon as possible. So the question is, if an apartment is $3,000, nobody inquires, nobody asks about it, why is that? That means that it's priced too high. So, but if that same apartment goes on the market for $3,000 and 20 people inquire about it and want to apply for it, what is the market telling us? Did something else happen? Did the apartment become better? Did some features get added? Like while of a sudden that same apartment is now more desirable, or more people is coming after it. So that comes with supply and demand comes in, right? And I'm going to be talking about that. I've been doing property management. I've been in this field for 25 years. I remember that .com boom that we had in the early 2000s. Yeah, we got to talk about that. Why is California rent so high? Okay, I'm going to leave the iPad alone because I'm not seeing what. I'll have to connect these later. Okay. There isn't one reason. So that's the answer. There's not one reason why California rent is high. It's a combination, I think, of a few different things. So I've been in, my name is Itonya. I go by Real Estate by Itonya. I've been doing property management for 25 years. I've been a realtor for 7 years. I'm not a lawyer, so this isn't legal advice. This is just education. We're just having a conversation based on the 25 years of experience that I have in the different markets that I've been in and seen. So here I'm going to go with at least it is about 7 reasons why I think the California rent is so high. And I think they kind of all work together a little bit. But you tell me, give me your comment on why you think the rent is so high. So just put a comment in there. How much rent you pay, what city you in. You can also, if you're not renting and you have a mortgage, how much is your mortgage and what city are you in? Let's get some comparison going. And I think it was one more question that I had out there for those who's just joining us. But let's just start with those. How much rent you pay, what city you in, what city, state, or country you're in. And if you have a mortgage, how much is your mortgage and what city you are in. So just put those in the comments. So the number one, well, not the number one reason, but one of the reasons I think California rent is so damn high is we don't have enough housing. I know. It's Itonya. There's I see a lot of places being built. I see a lot of ads available. I see a lot of rentals available. What you mean there's not enough housing? It's not enough housing. California hasn't built enough housing to keep up with the demand, particularly in many of the places where people want to live. It's just not enough housing. And I know that seems like that doesn't make sense. But some cities, they don't have a lot of availability. People who work in the Silicon Valley, which we're going to be talking about a little bit later, they probably want to live where they work at, and they may not be because it's not enough housing. Teachers, we hear this all the time, how they're not able to live in the cities that they teach in because the rent is either too high or there's just not enough housing for them, right? So think about this. So if we had 100 families are looking for somewhere to live, 100 families looking for somewhere to live, and the city only had 70 available homes. Thank you. Okay, we got a mortgage, it's $1,800. That is including insurance. And she's in California in the Central Valley. $1,800, okay. So for $1,800, I could get you probably a 1-bedroom apartment somewhere. So for $1,800, you could be having a house. But on a rental side, I could probably get you about a 1-bedroom apartment. But, okay. If we have 100 families and you're looking somewhere to live and there's only 70 available homes, what happens? 100 people need a place to live. There's only 70 homes, apartments, duplexes, whatever you wanted to call them. Only 70 is available. What happens? People compete for those 70 homes, right? And then sometimes, and I forgot the lingo, but this was kind of happening in Los Angeles when they had the fires, right? Because there was such a demand for housing that some of the it's a price gouging. That's what some of the owners in LA was doing, was price gouging. And the insurance commission, they were like, you can't do that, and they made it illegal. And the Department of Real Estate, they were talking about you can't do that. That's illegal to do the price gouging, right? But 100 homes, 70 people need a place to stay. Some of those 100 places probably would go up in price because it's now a supply and demand, right? So here's my question. Would you support building more apartments in your neighborhood if it meant housing could become more affordable? So I know where I stay at, there's no available land here. But would I support more housing being built in my area? I'm not going to answer that question. But you tell me in the comments, would you support it if you have more people living in your area? You know, I think it's 4 apartment buildings on the block I live in, and everything else is residential. So, would I support more people living in the area? Possibly. I feel like it's still I feel like we got enough. I feel like it's, a little bit congested, but will I support it if there was a place for them to build on? In order to help more people to find housing or get housing? That's the question. Would you be okay with more housing being built in your area, in your neighborhood, where you live? And just take into consideration, the grocery stores, the traveling to work, getting to the freeway. We also have another comment, I think, is high due to Silicon Valley and tech jobs in San Francisco. That's going to be my point 3. So I'm about to go to point 2. But we're going to talk about that, about the Silicon Valley, because that's when I actually started my career in property management, right during that era. So we're going to talk about that. So 2, the second reason why I think that California rent is so damn high is it's expensive to build housing. The supplies are expensive to build the housing, the wood, the aluminum, the plumbing fixtures, and all the stuff. The stuff in California is high, right? So people would say, okay, Itonya, just build more housing. That's what we would say, just build more housing. It sounds easy. And I just want to go back up a little bit. It sounds easy to build more housing, but it also takes years to do that because you got to find the land, you got to get the drawings for the housing, you have to start going through permits, and you need the construction people, the architect, the permits. It's like so much goes into building housing, and then the supplies is high, and you have to have the money for all of that, right? So California is an expensive place to build as well as to live. And that's kind of why the price of housing is high, because it's expensive to build. You know, if I'm building a building for $50,000 and it's only, say 20 units, I would have to, my rents would have to be, if I build a building for $50,000 and it's 20 units, my rents will have to start at $2,500 just to cover the cost of the build. But most places, unless you're a nonprofit, affordable housing, BRM, below market rate housing, they're looking to make a profit, right? So if I spent $50,000 to build 20 units, which is a little unrealistic, but you know, we're doing pretend, that's $2,500 just to make the baseline. So what am I going to do? I'm going to either find other things. That's where you start getting to, let's charge for parking. Let's charge if they got a view. Let's charge if you on this floor. Let's charge if you have balcony. Let's charge, you know, have you ever been to those places that, you know, I don't want to call it nickel and dime, but I feel like we get nickel dime, right? Because you're paying for all those additional features because they're trying to get that number up. And maybe not raise the rent, but get the number up, because $2,500, I'm breaking even. But, you know, I may have a bigger mortgage. I may have bills. I wanna be able to eat. I done built this, so you charge more. So, my reason number 2 is expensive to build housing. You know, you got to pay for the labor, the construction material. My reason number 2 is expensive to build housing. You know, you got to pay for the labor, the construction materials. Sorry, am I still live? Okay. I was trying to turn off an alarm. You got to pay for the permits. You got to pay for the development fees. You have to pay for the building requirements, the local approvals. And sometimes years go in between proposals and revisions and the project and actual building it. So, and then you're paying for the employees that's supposed to be doing all those things. So it gets pretty expensive in California to build. So if it costs a fortune to build an apartment, how cheap can the finished product realistically be? Right? Not that cheap. And let me just say, like the affordable housing places, they don't really make money, you know, because they're keeping the rents low and they're going below the market rate. They're not making money off of those affordable housings. Now they get other special like grants, discounts, and other perks for building affordable housing, but they don't make a whole bunch of money off of those. So my reason number 3 on why California rent is so damn high, and we kind of pointed to this, is Silicon Valley and the tech boom. Man, I don't know if anybody remember back then, 25 years ago, this 2026, so early 2000, 2001, 1999, when we thought the year was going to come to an end because of Prince, 1999. But we survived. We survived. The Silicon Valley and the tech boom is the reason number 3 why I think California rents are so damn high. You cannot talk about the Bay Area housing without talking about Silicon Valley. You cannot. You cannot talk about Bay Area with that. And this didn't start yesterday, right? This goes back about 25 years. That's when I first started getting in property management. I was working at Veranda's Apartments in Union City. It was right across the street from the Union City BART station. It was 282 units. And I feel Union City was pretty much that cutoff for people where rents was a little bit cheaper and not crazy like it was in Fremont or San Jose or Palo Alto. You know, people were commuting a little bit because they wanted to save some money because rent was high, there was a shortage of housing, and they needed a place to stay. So they would, it was crazy then because I remember at the apartment complex I worked at that we stayed full. People were like renting sight unseen. How much is it? Okay, here's my deposit. I want it. It's like, but you haven't even seen it yet. They didn't care. They wanted the apartment because they needed a place to live because they were being recruited to Silicon Valley to work in the tech field, and they needed somewhere to lay their head. And a lot of them were coming from different countries, so they would come, get settled, and then bring their wives. So they needed their own place. They didn't want to be sharing with the roommate, and their wife was coming. So I remember that. Do anybody remember any of the companies that came from the tech boom, specifically here in Northern California? Put in the comments any of those companies that remember the .com era. Let me say a few. Yahoo! That's what I remember from the commercial. Yahoo, we had eBay was popular or starting there. Sun Microsystem, Orco, Cisco, Intel, Hewlett Packard, HP, right? Apple was becoming more popular. Google, they're a little bit more than 25. Okay, I see Facebook, Google, Salesforce, Uber. We have Google started in 1998, and they were starting to grow. So they came in another generation, but they also were still growing. About time 2000 came. We have LinkedIn. We have Facebook then. That was called Meta. YouTube was growing then. We already said Salesforce, Uber, and Airbnb was coming out. So all those people, these companies was growing, and I mean they were paying over six figures, 100,000, 250, back 25 years ago. 25 years ago, that's how much people were coming in, making and paying, and they were renting sight unseen. It was wild. I mean, it was crazy, fun. And a lot was going on, and then it was even ridiculous things. Like people were renting a tent in their backyard. You could stay in my backyard and you just come inside and take a shower. I know that sounds ridiculous, right? Would you stay in the backyard in a tent? But that's how it was. We were short housing. People needed a place to stay, so people was opening up their garage, opening up their living rooms, opening up their backyard, letting people stay there because people were needing a place to stay, and they were making good money, but we had a shortage of housing. And now we've entered the AI era, right? So what's happened, a lot of those tech people, some of them was losing jobs because AI is kind of taken. But all of these companies and industries created tremendous wealth and high-paying jobs. And that was good for the economy. But all those workers needed somewhere to live, right? And we didn't have enough housing. And we didn't build housing at the same pace as we was creating jobs. So these companies was blowing up, but we just didn't have enough housing to put in. So now imagine you lived in the Bay Area your whole life. You're earning 60,000, 70,000, 80,000, and suddenly you're competing for housing with someone moving here for a tech job making 150,000 or 200,000. And now y'all both looking at this same one bedroom making the same money. And then back then, we didn't have as many regulations and rules. We didn't have AB 1482 that protects you, tenant protections and stuff. So people, they were charging more. Okay, who wants? Okay. You know, it was kind of like a like an auctioneer. Okay, you got 2,000, you got 3. How much can you pay for it? Winner. Okay, you gotta give me 3,100. You get it. You know, we didn't have the regulations. I don't recall doing that where I live, but where I was working at. But I do recall us raising the prices to go with the demand. We wasn't expensive at San Jose or Fremont, but we were up there because it was such a demand, and we could raise up our price, and people was paying it, right? Now we have, regulations, so it's harder to do that. Remember, I used that word price gouging. You can't do that now in California. It's a law. So who has more buying power? And it didn't just stop in Silicon Valley. When San Francisco, Palo Alto, Mountain View, San Mateo, and other areas got extremely expensive, people started looking further away. I remember during a pandemic, we had a lot of people in San Francisco, and they started moving to this side of the bay. I was working for a property management company, and all of our houses got rented right away. They was like, this house across the bridge is sometimes even less than my studio or one bedroom in the city. And because remember during the pandemic, they started, shut in, you could work from home, no going outside, no this, no that. So people, they were renting houses because they was working from home. They needed more space. They needed to put an office. So during the pandemic, our prices didn't go down. It was booming on this side of the bay. Now, San Francisco, they were struggling because a lot of people was moving out of the city. And I even, back then, even some places started going a little bit less. They were still expensive, but they were less because they were losing people. So they had to lower their rates. And then, in San Francisco, the buildings was older. It was hard for the internet. And, it was just all kind of issues going on. Which, just a side note, owners, keep your property updated. And but yeah, so when all those other cities got extremely expensive, people, they were looking further out, and they rather commute to work. And then that's how we started getting like Facebook, and I believe Google and some other place. They started getting buses. I remember living in Castro Valley, and there was a bus stop where people would pick up people in Castro Valley, and they would load onto the bus, and then they would go to another stop and pick up people. And instead of you driving into work, you caught the bus to work. Like a tour bus or something. It was like one of those type of buses, not like AC Transit, but yeah. I mean, they were trying to come up with solutions to what was going on and meeting people where they were. So when those other cities started getting high, even during this .com era with Silicon Valley, people were still moving as far out to Oakland, to Berkeley, to San Leandro, to Hayward, to Richmond. And what you think was happening with the rents? You got someone making 150, 200,000, they could pay 1,800, 2,000, 3,000 for that little one bedroom that was used to be $1,500. So that caused the pricing in California to be so darn high. And it puts additional demand on those housing markets too. So here's my question for my long-term Bay Area people. When did you notice things starting to change in California? Was it the Silicon Valley era, the .com area, the Facebook era, back when MySpace became popular, even though that was a LA company? But I remember having, before there was Facebook, it was MySpace. And if I'm not mistaken, did one of the owners or founders from MySpace start Facebook? Don't quote me on that because I didn't research that. So when did you start noticing things started to change? Was it during the .com era, the Google era, the Facebook era, or later? That's my third reason why I think rents are so damn high. So we're going to go into my fourth reason on why. Because I really don't think we can't really just say it's one thing. So my fourth reason is the cost of being a landlord, right? Because you have this property that needed to be, so the renters, now renters don't leave me because I'm going to switch a little bit to the housing provider, the landlord, because we got to talk about the other side, right? They pay a big portion in this too. So a renter sees one major number, the rent. That's what they see, the rent. But the owner has expenses too, right? They see the mortgage, the property taxes, the insurance, the plumbing, the electrical, the roof, the appliances, the landscaping, the pest control, the water and garbage, depending on the property, right? The property management fee if they hire in a property manager, the vacancies when people move out and they're sitting there, the turnover costs to get the property made for someone else, the repairs, and the cost of complying with all the laws and the regulation. So business licenses. Now we got rent registry fees for the cities. They got rent control. And that doesn't mean every rent increase is justifiable, but it doesn't mean every landlord is struggling either, right? But they have all these costs. When you call in and you say, I need this repair or something's not working or whatever, that's an expense for them. And sometimes, I don't know if you ever have it, but you may get charged for it if it was like deemed, your fault or something, because it's expensive. But if we're going to have an honest conversation about rent, operating costs has to be part of it. Because a lot of times landlords, for-profit companies, they're doing that for profit. They're not, I'm just going to provide this housing because, I have this rental and I'm a good Samaritan. And I'm not saying they not, because I work with a lot of owners, who I call, those do-it-yourself owners. They're like mom and pop owner. They only have maybe a couple of units. And a lot of these owners, they don't do rent increases. They do fair prices coming in. They're not trying to price gouge people. They don't do the yearly increase that they're entitled to, because they just want to provide people with a place to stay. And long as their mortgage and, the bills is getting paid, they're okay with, not doing the rent increases. I mean, I manage a building in San Leandro. It's 39 units. And although right now it's changing in January because we just got rent control starting January. But right now, say if we did it, say for the example this year, we could go up to 8.8% for a rent increase. But our owner, they was like, no, cap it at 4%. I don't want you to go higher than that. So that means that most of the people here, they may get a rent increase, but not the it's usually half of what we legally could do. So you have some owners like that really want to help people. And then you still got the slumlords, you still got the bad ones. I'm not going to say that they don't exist or whatnot. Usually the ones I work with isn't like that. But there are some out there that's greedy, that, don't want to follow the rules and all of that. So there's always two sides, right? So I'm going to go into reason number 5. And this is going to be my last reason. Oh, no, I got 6. Six reasons why I think California rent is so damn high. So reason number 5, what if the landlord has no mortgage? Okay, so here's where I want to start a little bit of trouble, a little controversy. So let's say one landlord bought a duplex in 1995. It's completely paid off. The person next door bought the exact same type of duplex recently and has a large mortgage. Should the landlord with no mortgage have to charge less rent? So should they charge less rent? Yes or no? Give me an answer in the comment. Should a landlord with no mortgage have to charge less rent because they paid off their duplex, they were good with their money, they got that good interest rate, the income that was coming in, the rents was coming in, they made sure that the mortgage got paid off sooner rather than later. They wasn't taking out loans on their property and spending that money to go buy something else. They paid it off. Should they charge less for their rental? And then let me just ask the question, would you? If you had a property and I got no, there's still upkeep and property tax needs to be paid. They still got expensive. So although the mortgage is paid off, they still got to pay for repair. Like, that list that I just read, right? Property taxes, they don't have a mortgage, but property taxes, insurance, plumbing, electrical, roof, appliances, landscaping, pest control. It's a long list of things that owners have to pay. So stop talking and let them. Okay. Here's the interesting part. Rent generally isn't determined by the size of a landlord's mortgage. Yeah. Now I know some landlords, they are trying to, get their property rented and they have a mortgage on it. They want that rent to cover their mortgage. And sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, right? So that's really what the market is influenced by, the rental market, right? So if a comparable apartment is renting for $2,500, that affects the asking price, whether that owner covers $800,000 on the property, whether they owe $800,000 or their property is paid off and they own nothing. They still have some expenses. So do you think it's fair? Right? So if you had a property, no mortgage on it, and the market rent is $2,500, would you only charge $1,500 for yours? Or something like that, and that's what we go through all the time. And a lot of times we're going to kind of go up with the market. When I'm doing a market analysis for an owner, if his mortgage is paid off, he's may allow me to go a little bit under the market just to get it rented because the mortgage is paid off. Now, here we go, and I kind of touched on this a little bit. This is my final reason why I think rent is so damn high in California. My final reason is you do have greedy landlords. We got to talk about it, right? There are greedy landlords out there. Greed I was about to say, that's not what they say. The root of all evil is money, but greed. Somebody is, going to say, Itonya, you're making this too complicated. Rent is high because landlords are greedy. Okay, let's talk about it. Are there landlords who charge as much as the market will allow? Of course. But here's the question. If every landlord woke up tomorrow and decided not to be greedy, which they're called sometimes anymore, would California suddenly have enough housing? So, no, because more housing hadn't been built, right? We still not solving the issue. So landlords' pricing can absolutely be a part of the conversation, but landlord greed alone doesn't explain California housing shortage. I put it in there because that greed, some slumlords, they exist. They do have to pay a lot, but they still exist. And I'm thinking, because it's been 25 years, but I could probably honestly say I have not ran into a slumlord that I represented or helped or worked for one. Now, I did, work for people who was conscious of spending money, but I've never worked for a slumlord. And I'm sorry if you ever lived in a slumlord place or had to deal with that or dealing with that now, because that is horrible. And if you are in that situation, just send me a DM and let's see if I can help you in your situation. And let's just put my disclaimer. I'm not an attorney. I can't give you legal advice, but I do have quite a few experience because your girl got 25 years over here. Okay, so I talked about 6 reasons why I think California rent is so damn high. So I just want to now kind of get into some of the law, because this is life, leases, and law, right? And it's so weird because I never saw myself, I never would have thought that I would be teaching about California law. Never. But yeah. So, AB 1482. So, the past 2 weeks I've been coming on here talking about rent increases and how rent has went up starting August 1st. The new CPI came out, right? But AB 1482. Now, let's get into the law, right, of the life, leases, and law. California has a Tenant Protection Act. So because people felt like California rent is so damn high, California was like, we got to do something. What is it that we could do? And that's when AB 1482 came into fruition. It was a 10-year law. This is year number 10, so they're supposed to be making some changes. I thought that we would have had it already, but I'm definitely gonna be talking about it when they do, because I'm ready to see, are we gonna keep it? Are you guys having changes? They are talking about changes, but we're not going to talk about that right now. So California has the Tenant Protection Act, also called AB 1482. So for many covered rental properties, state law limits how much increase could be given during a 12-month period. And I've been talking about some cities that has rent control. So different cities, they could take this California law and say, okay, California, and I'm going to talk about this year's rent increase. So, okay, California, you said that I could raise my rent 5% plus the CPI, 5% cost of living, the CPI, Consumer Price Index. I said it backwards. That is 3.8, and that's how we get the 8.8%. So that's the cap that California puts on every city, county, district in California, Northern and Southern California, all of California. AB 1482 is the rent cap. So some cities, they was like, no. Like Oakland, we have a big homeless issue, so no, owners can't raise their rent 8.8%. They can only raise it 2.3%. Berkeley, 1%. Richmond, I think it's 1.67%, a little oddball amount. Hayward said we got to put a 5% cap. You could go over 5%, but you got to give a reason why you need to raise the rent over 5%. What other cities have rent control? Antioch. I don't know why, but Antioch changes every 2 months. I know San Francisco got rent control. San Jose. There's certain things in Mountain View. So some cities, they was like, we're not doing 8.8. We got to do less. So they could do less, but they couldn't go over. You couldn't have a city that be like, well, I'm a special city, so my rent increase is going to be 10. No. AB 1482 limits that, right? If you did get a 10% increase. There are some exceptions to the rule, like single-family homes wasn't included in this, some condos, some houses. So there's always an exception to the rule. But if you have questions, just send me a DM, and I'll do my best to answer. Not as a lawyer point of view, as an educator. So not every I just kind of talked about, not every rental property is covered by the statewide rent cap. And that's one of the things that they're thinking about doing with this new AB 1482 is also putting a rent cap on single-family homes. That's not included in this right now. So there's also something called the 15-year new construction exemption. 15-year new. So if, because we're in needing housing, right? We was in needing housing. So what they said that if you build housing for us for 15 years, you won't have to you'll be exempt from AB 1482. That's what I'm trying to say. So for 15 years, a new housing, if you build new housing, not remodeled housing, but if you build new housing, they gave you a certificate of occupancy. The previous 15 years, you will be exempt from AB 1482 statewide. And I want to make sure we understand this. Right. So if it's because there's a lot of new construction. If I could just take Oakland, downtown Oakland, there's a lot of new buildings out there. And, you know, those buildings, they'll offer you, get 2 months free rent. Oh, we only got a $500 deposit. Rent now, get 2 months free. And they do all of that. And you like, yay! You know, I don't $99 deposit and I don't have nothing to move in. And then after that year, you get this enormous rent increase. I mean, like $500, $700. It's like, wait a minute. Why? What? Where this rent increase come? They're trying to recoup all that money that they gave you for moving in. So you think it's a great deal. But you got to get a rent increase. You got to be like, this is crazy. And that's because they don't have AB 1482. They don't have like a regulation that tells them, no, you can't raise the rent that high. So they raising it as high as they are. I remember telling someone on the phone, I don't think that's really ethical. But they was like, well, how high can I raise the rent? Now it's like, well, they don't really have a cap. There's really not a regulation. There's no AB 1482 that's telling you the most you could raise the rent is this. So they will raise the rent as much as they want, 10, 15, 20%. Sounds ridiculous, but they are. So then people see that And then they think all landlords are bad. They greedy. No, those newer companies that don't have the regulation like the small mom and pops do or the older buildings do. You wanted the modern place, the zoom zooms and the wham whams with what they got, the pet washing station with the gym and the concierge and what other amenities they have in these new places. Put that in the comments too. And don't get me wrong, I love the zoom zooms and wham whams. I do. And I probably would love it too. Now, a lot of times, really, all those zoom zooms and wham whams, people don't never use them. But they like having them. They like having it there until they get that rent increase. So that doesn't mean that, that doesn't mean a new apartment has no laws, right? They are still landlord-tenant laws, habitability requirements, fair housing law, security deposit laws, notice requirements, and potential local laws that they still have to follow. But they just exempt from AB 1482, which is our tenant protections and our rent increase laws, right? So I'm specifically talking about AB 1482 exemptions, and they're okay. It's telling me my live is going to end in 5 minutes. Okay. So California desperately need housing. If you make housing too difficult or financially unattractive to build, developers may decide, I'm not building it there. But look at it from a renter side. You could live in a newer building while somebody down the street lives in an older rent control apartment, and the rules affecting your rent could be different. So what do you think? Should new apartment buildings get that 15-year exemption if it encouraged developers to build more housing? Or should renters in those buildings have stronger protections? Would you impose AB 1482 on them? Because that AB 1482 exemptions for them was an incentive to build more housing, because they feel that we're short housing here in California, and that's the reason why rent is so damn high. So let's talk about rent control. Is it helping or hurting us? So does rent control help California housing problem, or does it hurt it? So rent control could provide stability for existing tenants. It could help prevent someone from suddenly being priced out of a home that they lived in for years, and that's important. But critics argue that some forms of rent regulation could discourage investment or reduce incentives to create rental housing. So maybe a better question is rent control, yes or no? What you think? Should we have rent control or no? Let me know in the comments. Maybe it's, how do we protect renters while also giving people enough incentive to build more housing? Home ownership is a part of this too. So there's another reason rent stays under pressure. Buying a home in California is extremely expensive too. I remember back when we had the pandemic, I believe that's when we got that 2 or 3% rent increase. 2 to 3% interest, and people was buying homes, but the homes, it was more demand. So the prices of those homes was going up, right? That people were trying to buy. Some people still got priced out because the price went up. Oh, I'll give you $100,000 over your asking if I get it. And that what was happening with those low interest rates. And there's another reason rent stays under pressure, buying home. Think about what happens when someone who ordinarily would have become a homeowner but can't afford to buy. They keep renting. This means they're still competing with other renters for available rental housing. So California's home ownership affordability problem and its rental affordability problem are connected. So what they were doing, like we get a lot of housing programs trying to, and incentives to try to get people to get housing. Cities have certain programs where they give you money and grants and things to get people in a house. So there's more available rentals available for people. And then a lot of people, their mortgage is less than it is to rent. So who's to blame? So let's just put everything together. Why is California rent so high? So we talked about not enough housing, decades of underbuilding, high land prices, expensive construction, permits and development costs, Silicon Valley and high paying job growth, high demand, the cost of operating rental property, landlord pricing decisions, government regulations, rent control policies, and home prices so high that people stay renting longer. So I don't think the answer is simple, right? It's the landlords, and I don't think it's simple. It's the government. The problem took decades to create. It's probably going to take some more than one solution to fix it, So the big final questions. If you were governor of California tomorrow and you could change one thing to lower housing costs, what would you do? Give me your answer. So if you was the governor starting tomorrow, we just elected you in, what is one thing you would change to lower the housing costs? I'm almost done. I don't know if TikTok, they got to cut me off because I put that it was only going to be an hour. So, would you build more housing, allow more apartments in existing neighborhoods, lower development costs, expand rent control, reduce rent regulations, build more affordable housing, create more home ownership programs, or tell landlords they simply need to lower the rent? What would you do if you was governor? Put it in the comments. What's your solution? So go ahead and do that. And then I'm going to move into just the announcement and close. Okay. So I'm moving to Tuesday. So today's Thursday. I'm going to be moving my lives to Tuesday. I have, Tuesdays is just going to work better for me. I have less on my schedule. Thursday's usually my long day. And then I come home and I do the live. And then I stay up to edit videos and stuff. So Tuesday is just going to be a better day for me. So you will start seeing me next week on Tuesdays at 7:30 instead of Thursdays. It's going to be the same Life, Leases, and Law with some real conversations. But starting next week, it'll be on Tuesdays. So make sure you follow Real Estate by Itonya so you don't miss it. And I'll see you Tuesday. And then just in closing, I just want to say, and remember why we call this Life, Leases, and Law. So life becomes housing affects how we actually live. So the life part is housing affects how we actually live. The lease part, because renters and housing providers are entering into a financial and legal relationship. And then the law, because California has a whole lot of rules governing that relationship. So we're going to keep talking about all three, life, leases, and laws. So I'm Itonya with Real Estate by Itonya. Follow me, and I'll see you on Tuesday. Real talk, real law, real solutions. Thank you for joining tonight. If you're in the replay, just start answering some of those questions. DM me. if you have some specific questions, and I will do my best to answer them or point you in the right direction. Thank you for joining.